Good morning and welcome to worship from the Old Ship Meeting House, from the place at which First Parish in Hingham, Unitarian Universalist worships each week, virtually for you today, for us today, but still, you are here in our Old Ship Meeting House. Welcome. We begin as we do each week with a bell, a chime, and then our prelude this morning, a prelude in D major by J.F.K. Fisher. And so we begin. Thank you, Christopher. We have gathered at this time for worship. From wherever we have been in this week past, whatever this week past has brought to us, we gather, whether with joys or sorrows or a measure of both in our hearts. We gather, whether with worries and fears, hopes and courage, we gather. May this time together offer comfort for any hearts which are troubled, nourishment to feed our spirits, inspiration for hands yearning to reach out and help and heal and care. We have gathered for worship and it is good. So together. Our introit from Chris Marr, Listen to the People.
From the great Atlantic Ocean to the wild Pacific shores, we're marching for democracy, equality, and more. Free speech to us is sacred, our laws protect us all. Come join the call for freedom, building bridges, not a wall. Listen to the people, join the movement, get on board. Voting rights and justice are not words to be ignored. Our government belongs to us, for all, not just the few. Healthcare and education, immigration reform too.
Thank you, Chris. Our chalice this morning, flaming chalice of our faith, will be lit by Chloe Brede. Chloe.
Thank you. Our chalice lighting this morning comes from the Reverend Paul Dodenhoff. I think it's a good reminder to take some time, especially in this moment of anxiety that we're probably all in at the moment. So our chalice lighting. For this 1 hour, Spirit of life, we let go. For this 1 hour, may we let go of our anxieties, our fears, our anger, our self-doubts, our regrets, our petty grievances, and our distractions. If only for this 1 hour, let the flame of this chalice burn them from our hearts and minds, and light our way to peace and serenity for this one holy hour.
Thank you, Chloe. In that spirit, I light the chalice. We are invited to sing together. We won't hear everyone, but I hope you'll sing along. It's a hymn that most of us know well, simple words, important words. One more step. Number 168 in our hymn book. One more step. One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. One more word, one more prayer, one more prayer. Prayer is heard by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song, till every song is sung, and everyone will sing one more song. Oh, we felt each other singing. Thank you all. Good morning again, and welcome to worship from the Old Ship Meeting House, First Parish in Hingham, Unitarian Universalist. Welcome. I want to say a word at the outset about this vote collage. It's a collage behind me, and some of you may recall it was given to us quite a number of years ago by one of our Old Ship artists, Anita Franks. She gave it to us with one proviso, an important proviso, that it be displayed in this meeting house every time there was an election, whether local or, as on Tuesday, as this season, national. And so we display it once again. I think we've kept to her proviso pretty well over the years. Vote. Announcements. You saw, if you opened the Sunday reminders yesterday, that it actually went beyond Sunday. There are a number of events this week, particularly if we are feeling anxious or concerned about the election. There are a number of ways to be with other people online on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, which were outlined in that email. We'll send out similar information on Tuesday. You're invited, whether to larger Unitarian Universalist events, to be together with other UUs, or to our own Kaylee for singing and poetry on Tuesday evening, election reflections that I'll lead on Wednesday afternoon. But everyone is welcome to everything that you see. And then if you're in need of some meditation, at the end of the week on Saturday, I'll be offering my pretty much annual So You Want to Meditate workshop at 3 p.m. The link will be in the weekly update, or you can email me. Once again, I am pleased to introduce Chloe for our Time for All Ages. Chloe.
Thank you. So in this sermon today, Ken is going to be talking about our fifth principle of Unitarian Universalism. It's the right of consciousness and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Or more simply put, maybe as we would say with the kids, we UUs want everyone to have a voice in our government and in the world. Voting is one of the many ways people can have a voice. We remind the kids of this. Tuesday, we have a big opportunity to vote. If anybody has forgotten, I think you've been reminded a lot over the last couple of weeks. We vote for the president, and it's pretty exciting. But sometimes people forget to vote, or they get too busy, or the weather isn't good, or they may even think that it doesn't matter. But a lot of UUs this year are helping to remind people to vote, to register to vote, or to sign up to vote, and then to remember to vote on this election day. In fact, we're so excited as UUs about voting this year that a new campaign or group started called UU the Vote. And I'm a big fan of this. I think this is really cool that we did this. This organization has helped UUs, both individual people and churches, do voting work, help with voting. For example, here at Old Ship, the youth group wrote letters to voters as a part of that campaign. And I know that Ken, our minister, and a bunch of other people in the church have sent letters and postcards. People are really really excited this year. Perhaps if you've sent a postcard or done anything to encourage voters, maybe you can tell us about it in the chat. If you've written any postcards or done anything else, we'd love to hear about it quickly. At other churches, people are making phone calls and sending text messages. So a phone call might sound something like this. Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm calling to remind you that there's an important election coming up in America. We want to remind you to vote. Have you voted yet? You haven't yet? When do you plan to vote? On Tuesday? Okay, what time? Before you go to work? Okay, great, fantastic. You might get another call reminding you Tuesday morning to go vote, but thank you so much for remembering to do that. Or they might, in addition to making phone calls, they might be sending text messages. That's something that people are doing too. So they might say, hi, my name is Chloe. I'm reminding you that today is election day, or there's an election coming up. Find your voting location by clicking here. And then text us back once you voted so we know. We're going to be getting a lot of those text messages and phone calls, and there's a lot of UUs who are the ones behind those efforts. So it's really cool. And so these are all important efforts to make sure that people get their voices heard in this democracy. So before we go on with the rest of the service, I wanted to introduce you to a UU who's doing this work in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is an important place because we know the election might be sort of close there, that there might be a little neck and neck. So I wanted to introduce you guys to the Reverend Kathy Ryan Starr, one of the people who's been working for UU the Vote over the last couple of months. And we're going to hear a bit about what she's doing to help get out the vote in the digital age. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we're just going to watch about a minute of her talking about this.
Many. So welcome to my field. Here with my reading glasses and my large screen, instead of my sunglasses and walking shoes for door knocking. The organizing field of pandemic times, where we gather in Zoom rooms large and small to reach thousands upon thousands of voters and potential voters. Just before recording this, 20 of us from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Washington, D.C., my own Connecticut, and Massachusetts gathered in a Zoom room with our partners at CASA, a group organizing to build power in immigrant and working class communities in central Pennsylvania. In 2 hours, we sent over 60,000 texts to urge folks to check and update their voter registration or to get registered. We texted with people who had lost their jobs and apartments due to the pandemic, and we connected them with community resources. We texted with someone who is homeless and helped them get the information they need to be able to register to vote. We texted with lots of folks who weren't sure if their registration was up to date and helped them check their status.
We know that over 90 of them followed up to register. And we texted with some people who said they follow God's law, and their faith tells them not to participate in voting. Dear ones, our faith says that the here and now matters. That we live our faith not for the possibility of heaven when we die, but to create heaven here on earth. What we do, what you do, matters.
So I would say an amen to that. Kathy reminds us that voting and helping other people vote is really a part of our UU faith. So thank you to everyone who's been working so hard to make sure our voices get heard. I'm really proud of being a UU this year and in this election. So thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. And I will add my thanks to those who've been participating. Sometimes it's just word of mouth, encouraging one another during these difficult times. Thank you. We come to our time of sharing joys, sorrows, and concerns. We're invited to type into chat if we have a joy we'd like to share, or a sorrow, or a concern we feel the need to share. I've heard from a number of folks who are concerned and hopeful about the election, so I will light a candle for that. And I heard from Catherine Mays, who writes this: a dear friend, Michelle Simmons, is in hospital with COVID-19 on ventilators and struggling. The disease is progressing very quickly. Michelle is a teacher who believed in Mike's ability, Mike is Catherine's son, as many of you know, in Mike's ability to learn, and who helped Mike all through elementary school. And so the second candle will be for for Michelle and her health and well-being. And the rest of the candles will be for all those joys, sorrows, and concerns that have been named in the chat or that have remained unnamed. We hold them all as we hold one another. We're invited now to a time of meditation, prayer, and then gathered silence. Blessed silence in the midst of these challenging times. Blessed peace in the midst of whatever worries might plague us, whether personal or national. Blessed silence, blessed peace, from which prayers might arise. For wherever we believe our prayers to go, we know from where they grow, from our deepest hearts. Prayers. Today, as always, prayers for one another, particularly those we know who are facing illness or financial challenge, loneliness, or whatever difficulty life has brought them. Prayers for our congregation, that we might support one another during these times. Prayers for our nation in this hour of crisis and opportunity. Prayers for the family of humanity, for the family of life on this dear earth we share. Prayers of our hearts, prayers from our hearts, as we enter a time of silence and peace. May the silence be renewing. May the peace spread from us to others. introduce our soprano soloist, Heather Molasco, for our anthem. Heather. Thank you, Heather. We've been listening to a piece by Rosa Macias, Profetiza Pueblo Mío, which means prophecy, O my people. And just a few of the words in English that we've been hearing. Let this be what you hope for, the battle that you choose, to build a social order with justice at its core. I sanctify you, prophet, banish all doubt and fear, be faithful to your mission, the quest that leads us on. Good words, and thank you, Heather. The first reading, which I'll share, comes from the Hebrew prophets, first from Amos, and then a line or two from Micah. Amos, I despise your feasts, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the peace offerings of your fattened animals, I will not look upon them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. To the melody of your harps, I will not listen, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And then Micah, he has told you what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Here ends the first reading. Our second reading will be shared by Keely Jordan. Keely, thank you.
The second reading is from a recent column in the New York Times by the novelist by Marilynne Robinson, Don't Give Up on America. This country would do itself a world of good by restoring a sense of the dignity, even the beauty, of individual ethicalism, of self-restraint, of courtesy. These things might help us to like one another, even trust one another, both necessary for a functioning democracy. This country was, from the onset, a tremendous leap of faith. We tend not to ponder the brutality of the European world at the time our colonies formed and then fledged, so we have little or no idea of the radicalism, not only of stating that men, as creatures of God, were equal, but of giving the idea profound political consequences by asserting for them unalienable rights, which were not defined and elaborated in the Constitution. Our history to the present day is proof that people find justice hard to reach and to sustain. It is also proof where justice is defined as equality, a thing never to be assumed. Justice enlarges its own definition, pushing its margins in light of a better understanding of what equality should mean. There is much to be done, more than inevitably limited people can see at a given moment. But the other side of our limitation is the fact that it carries with it a promise that we still might see a new birth of freedom, and another one beyond that. Democracy is the great instrument of human advancement. We have no right to fail it. Here ends the second reading.
Thank you, Keely. Thank you very much. I'll have a little more to say about Marilynne Robinson's words later on. Thank you, Keely. Come to our time of the offertory. We cannot, of course, literally, physically pass the plate, but we can invite your gifts through our website. You can click on the donate button, and that gives you two options. You can use one or both. One to give to the plate for our general use to meet our budget and so on, all the ministries of our congregation, and the other to give to our monthly outreach offering. And this month, November, we will begin giving to the Friends of the Homeless of the South Shore, an organization with which we've worked closely over the years. So again, though we can't give physically, we can certainly still give. And we invite your giving as we listen, or afterwards, anytime this week. But today, as we listen to the offertory, which Christopher will offer, If Every Woman in the World by Karen McKay. Our morning offering will now be given and received as we appreciate the music.
If every woman in the world had her mind set on freedom, if every woman in the world dreamed a sweet dream of peace, if every woman of every nation, young and old, each generation, held her hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. If every man in the world had his mind set on freedom, if every brother stood with brother as a witness of peace, if every man of every nation worked for justice and liberation, holding hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. in the world, shared a vision of freedom. If every leader in the world shared a sweet dream of peace, if every leader of every nation worked for justice and liberation, holding hands out in the name of love, holding hands out in the name of love, holding hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war.
Thank you, Christopher, and thanks to all of you who give and who continue to give to the work, the ministries of our congregation. A long New England tradition in many of our congregations is the election sermon. It's a tradition I've honored most years, and certainly most presidential election years, as I do today. So here we go. Voting for democracy is my theme. And first, to quote a Pete Seeger song, we must not give up and must not give in. We must not give up on what has often been called the American experiment in democracy, or give in to those who say that democracy has failed, its time has passed, we're doomed to continue a slide into ever more stark polarization, vitriol, hate, and calcified centuries-long inequities and injustice. And we must not, cannot give up the critical effort to slow global warming and mitigate climate change, the central issue of our time, which is interwoven with issues of justice. So we must continue seeking climate justice. As poet Denise Levertov wrote years ago, in words that are printed in our hymn book, we share from time to time, and they are more relevant than ever. She wrote, "How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture." Okay. It may not seem these days as if there's much in bud, much good anyway in bud. May not always seem that there is. Indeed, many fear that if the election doesn't go their way, all hope is lost. People have expressed that on both sides of these divisions. But we must not be among that number. Sure, we can name whatever fear or worry has been plaguing us, maybe whether at 2 a.m. or 24/7, name it. It's there for many of us. Name it, don't ignore it, but we must not succumb to it. We must not. For there's too much to be done to ensure that justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And how can we fail to continue to strive to live as the prophet Micah enjoined us to do justice and love kindness? Isn't that how we want to live? As best we can. Each of us, as imperfect as our American democracy is, of course, imperfect. How could it be otherwise than imperfect, since it was formed and sustained as best we can by imperfect human beings? Marilynne Robinson, from whom we heard earlier, to my mind, one of the most perceptive American writers and thinkers of our time, whether in her novels or her essays, she, in the piece we heard, named the challenges that are facing us as an inevitably limited people. But at the same time, she wrote, outrageous as it might sound to some, she wrote that, quote, "Democracy is the great instrument of human advancement. We have no right to fail it." Winston Churchill is once said to have said that democracy is the worst system of government ever invented, except for all the rest. It's what we have, democracy. I titled my sermon, Voting for Democracy, as I've said, and as you might surmise, I'm not just talking about actual voting, which I expect most of you have already done or will do, just as most Americans have already done and will do, exercising this most fundamental of democratic rights. No, I'm talking about voting, again, not only in the election booth, but even if voting is not the right word, but not just with our ballots, but also with our heart, with our hands, with our hope. Voting through, in so many ways, through financial support of a candidate who we believe in, if we're able to do that. If we feel a candidate's aligned with our values, voting by signing petitions or sending emails or letters, voting if we can to give to a candidate or give to an organization that's aligned, again, with our values, or voting simply in conversations with friends and neighbors about all that must be done to right wrongs, to help fellow Americans, to help people wherever they are, to help our nation live more closely aligned to the ideals expressed in the preamble to our Constitution. Those words, to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Well, those are good words, written, again, by imperfect people, imperfect men, as it happened, but they inspire nevertheless. For look, we know very well, even though we still might not know well enough, the legacies, sins, if you will, of injustice upon which our nation was built, genocide of native peoples, slavery, Jim Crow, and on it goes to this day. Yes, with real progress on many fronts, but so much still need to be done. So much still needs to be done. All the more reason to keep on voting for democracy with hand and heart and hope. And after all, for Unitarian Universalists, as we heard earlier from Chloe and our colleague, for Unitarian Universalists, voting and participation in democracy is not just a civic duty. It is that, but it's also part of our religious heritage and our stated principles. Our fifth principle, as Chloe said, says it, the right of conscience and the use of the we affirm this, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Now, how is it that the democratic process is part of among our religious principles? It's really quite simple. It can be as simple as drawing a line between our first stated principle, affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person, about which we could have conversations, given that there are people who behave pretty poorly. Where's their inherent worth and dignity? So we'd have that conversation. But the affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, along with other affirmations of having to do with seeking justice, we draw a line right from those to the democratic process. The democratic process. So it's clear to me that this is a religious or spiritual affirmation, not all that different, the inherent worth and dignity to begin with, from those in various faith traditions who affirm that we are all children of God. When it comes to our own principles, the ones that speak of justice, they, of course, too, can draw another line from the ancient Hebrew prophets to the sages of all religious traditions who affirm that justice seeking is such a critical, essential part of our religious and spiritual lives. Anyway, it's likely I didn't have to convince you of much of this, if any of it, but I know it helps me to be reminded of the deep spiritual roots of democracy, whatever form democracy takes, whether Iroquois councils, New England town meetings, our elections, and in the halls of Congress. In other words, to be reminded that though church and state, as it's usually put, must always be separate, we are called at the same time by our religious principles, and not just Unitarian Universalists, so many faiths are called by our religious principles and values, to bring those principles and values not only into our personal lives, of course, but into our civic and political lives as well, also, of course. For we're not divided, each of us, into our spiritual self and our political self. We are one self, each of us, called to live from our values and principles, to live the wisdom of our hearts, again, beginning with our families, our circles of friends, neighborhoods, and extending outwards, of course. So, in the same spirit, I know I don't have to exhort you, of all people, I know you, to vote and to participate in the democratic process in whatever ways you're able and that suit you. I know, again, I find it helpful, as maybe you do too, to remember that this participation in the democratic process is an interwoven part of our religious and spiritual lives. And I also, this morning, name what also needs no naming, that we are living in and through a crisis of our imperfect American democratic experiment, and that our participation in helping to see us through this crisis is essential. Each one of us matters. And first, why? First, to help us return, as Marilynne Robinson wrote, to return to a sense of the dignity, even the beauty of individual ethicalism, of self-restraint, of courtesy. Things that, again, quoting her, might help us to like one another, even trust one another, both necessary to a functioning democracy. And why does it matter? Second, because there is so much in bud. There really is so much in bud, from the rising for racial justice to the rising for climate justice, to all the other needs we see for healthcare for all, immigration rights, equal access to good education, and more, so that the children and grandchildren of our generation, of our time, will have a democratic nation to inherit. We'll live in a country of greater equality and a shared ethic of mutual care, and we'll have a habitable earth on which to live in time to come. And may all this be so. May all this be so because we help to make it so. Each of us just doing the one more thing, one more step, one more prayer, and so on as the hymn had it. Just doing the next one thing, speaking the next word, sending the next dollar to a cause we support, sending the next letter or email. None of us have to do it all. Of course not. But together, well, that's another matter. If we don't give up, if we don't give in, and offering helping hands to one another all along the way, for we are, friends, on this journey together. May we continue. May it always be so. Amen. And blessed be. I will extinguish the flames of joy, sorrow, and concern, flames lit with love. I'll extinguish the flame of our Unitarian Universalist flaming chalice of truth, freedom, dignity, worth, and love. But I cannot extinguish the love or the values. They go with us wherever we go, step by step, day after day. Invite us to sing again. If you have a hymn book, it's in your teal book, or if you downloaded the Order of Worship, Building a New Way, number 1017, building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed every need. We can feed every need. We can feed every need. Start with love and plant the seed. We can feed every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without peace, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. Oh, amen to all that. Words from a UU colleague. When the path feels too steep, let us keep moving, for we have strength we have yet to know. When we doubt what is next, may we know that our actions matter, though we may not even see why. When we seek comfort and courage, may we remember that we are not alone on this journey and never have been. And so may we all move forward with courage, which means with heart, toward a world that we can build together. Only together can we build this world. So may it be. Amen. Blessed be. Katie Weintraub will offer our choral benediction, Be the Change, and then Christopher, our postlude. Katie.
Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. And change will come to you. And change will come to you.
And we go in peace.